I'm Jennifer Fairbanks and I'm the Creative Bear Essentials. This is a tutorial on how to take your sloper that you've created for your bra and turn it into a single vertical seam cup. Now this design will not work for every single person. This is definitely a better design for a smaller cup. A larger cup will have to get a little bit more creative with how they're going to be cutting the fabric. Because of the size of the pattern pieces, it could cause flat spots. But this is a great little tutorial that you can actually see some of the other items that I'm going to be offering. So this is being offered for free, but if you would like to see this in course form, there is a paid version and I am offering a discount for a limited time, and you can get the coupon below. And I'll have the expiration date on there too, so you know exactly when it will expire. But this video and the online course, the main differences between it is that the online course is going to be split into much smaller videos. You actually watch a step and then you can draft that with the class, and then if you didn't catch what you did, you can always replay that video and then go to the next video when you're ready for the next step. The difference with the YouTube video is that the YouTube is just all in one block. So this is just my teaser to entice you to sign up for my other sloper drafting classes. I have 11 different designs that can be purchased as online classes, or you can buy the full lot which covers all of the classes together. And the links for that is also below. Enjoy drafting. This is a sneak preview of one of the sloper manipulations you can do with your Eve cup. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to trace off our sloper. And we're going to be making, that one, I think I need to throw that away. That's the second time that pencil's done that. We're going to make a single vertical seam. So, and I showed in another video how to actually turn this into a sloper. And then I used my online form, or even you can also use the Excel sheet. And I figured out what my curve percentages are supposed to be. So I have that written down right here, and I can show you on the computer as well. So right here, my green line right here is showing my vertical line. Now we're going to be making a vertical seam, but it does not have to go right to that point. I could actually have it come off a little bit so it kind of maybe curves up towards the neckline. But this is really up to you. You could keep that right where it is, or we can move it. I'm going to move this one. And it is still, I know that it is between the vertical and the diagonal line, but I'm still going to be using the vertical value because the amounts would be very similar. If you're not really sure, you can always plug in the amounts for this and plug in for the amounts of this and take the average to get the curve for here. But it is essentially going to be the same. So I've gone ahead and split my cup right here. And what I'm going to do is actually split my cup. So I'm just going to keep a little bit of space around there. And I'm going to add some paper back to both of these so I have some room to work. Tape folded. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to find the halfway points on each of these lines. So this line, this line, this line, and this line. So I can take my paper and fold it so I've actually got that halfway point. Make sure you mark a big enough marking right there. Of course, it would have been a little bit easier had I done that before I cut it. And I can see my paper. There it is. Basically just finding the halfway points on each of these. You can certainly measure, but I find this to be the easiest solution. Once we find our halfway points, then we're going to take this amount that we've determined over here, and at that halfway point I'm going to mark out from this point out, so from that point out, this amount, which I have is 5/8 of an inch. Now the calculator is also available in metric, so you can actually get your metric measurements as well. And so I'm doing this on all 4 places. Okay, so I've kind of taken from here and come out, here and come out, there and come out, and there and come out. And then I'm going to use my curves. Now this is one of the curves I have, I do carry. I had these specially made. They're half scale slopers and they work really well. Or not slopers, they're half scale curved rulers, just like the hip curve, but half the size. These are sometimes easier to manage when you're actually doing this. So I'm going to take my half scale and I'm going to come up to right about the halfway point. And I'm doing this all in pencil, because you will likely have to change this. And if you notice, I'm only going halfway through the curve right now. And then I'm going to come in, and if you look, if I were to come all the way back to this point, which I will just for a point of reference, is if we bring it right back to the apex, we're going to have a funny little bubble. And I'll address that in just a moment. And here we have a funny little point. So when we actually stopped and cut this apart, we had shaved off a little bit on the outside. And that was due to when we actually remove our curves and we put our straight lines together, we do remove a little bit, but when we add our curves back, that space is added to the outside a little bit. So just as we would add it to the outside, in here we might actually have to add it to the inside. So I'm going to take my curve, and I actually, at this point, I may need a bigger curve, and I'm going to try and connect these 2 points. So that way we have a nice smooth curve, and this is still looking like it's a little bit off, so I'm actually going to bring this a little bit more. And you know, the amounts that I have for, you know, where these positions are, these are only suggestions. This amount can change and will change based on your shape. So they're guidelines. So I'm still not liking my shape very much, and there we go. So let me grab an eraser. So the lines that I want to use now, and you can see how that curve kind of developed, and it kind of got shaved off over here. But as you notice, I have a nice smooth curve. That one's broken. So now I want to do the same thing over here. So we did come out here, so that was a fair amount, so we could actually remove a little bit from this side, which I think may make more sense since this is coming up to a point. I'll use the smaller one. So I'm going to shave off a little bit right here for that shape. So we've basically taken our sloper, which was originally a 3-piece cup, and we've turned it into a 2-piece cup. Now this is not finished. We still have to walk our edges, so meaning that we actually need to make sure that these seam lengths are the same. So right from the apex, I'm going to kind of come out a 45-degree angle from where that curve is. So this is right at that apex point. And then I'm going to, and this is great if you have a light box, I'm going to mark, so line up my 2 curved points at that same point, right at the apex, and then I'm going to slowly walk my curve So kind of taking my fingers and walking it along that curve and seeing that one needs to become longer. So on this piece I've walked that from there on this one. And it is a little bit hard to see right here. Like I said, a light box would be really great. But I've been doing this for a long time, so I can see through my paper, so then that one comes out to here. So that is the adjustment that needs to be made on this pattern, is that this needs to come out and be a little bit longer just to get the seam length correct. So now that the seam lengths are the same, we now want to go in and make sure that the lines in which they get sewn together don't pucker or kind of come to a dip or anything. So before I do that, I'm just going to label this as my center front, and this is my side, and that's the strap, and this is the wire line, and this is the neck. Because once you start working with these, it's really easy to flip them and forget what you're working on. So I'm going to fold this right on the end of that curved line, and I'm going to line that right up. See where that new marking is? Rotate it here so you can see. So that curve, to match that curve, it has to come down to here. And I'm just going to take a little piece of tape to show you how we're going to fix this. So like I said, when we cut these down and made this curve, we did lose some spacing at the top and at the bottom. And this is where it is corrected. So if we notice, we actually can even take this and be a straight line from the high point here to high point here, because we do not want that to dip in. Otherwise you're going to have a funny little area in your bra itself. So I'm going to take, and this is going to be where my wire line is, and I'm just going to take and continue that line here. So this is my new pattern length, and we're going to do the same thing up at the top. The top should be a little bit easier because we have because we have a curve up here anyways. So you're just going to blend your curve from the new point into your center front. Okay, so now the two seams have been walked. We know that where they get sewn together is actually going to look good. And the next thing we need to do is we need to add seam allowance to these. And actually, let me make that just a little bit better. Like that. And our seam allowances to get sewn into any band is going to be 1/4 of an inch pretty much everywhere, or 6 millimeters. Some companies may, and some people prefer to do, let's say 10 millimeters, which is about 3/8 of an inch. You're welcome to do that. Just remember that when you're doing a bra seam, you need that seam to be relatively small in order to be able to, you know, to deal with it. You could sew it at 3/8 and then trim it down. Just for the sake of continuity, I'm going to do this at 1/4 of an inch, so around the wire line. And this is just a plain grid ruler. I have a couple of these left. I wasn't real happy with the manufacturing of them. I'm going to try and find a better source where I can get them in bulk. But in general, it's just a plain grid ruler. You can probably pick one up on eBay or Amazon for a couple bucks. I'll see if I can find a link to this. This is just the one I use when I'm working on bras. I usually use a much bigger one when I'm working on everything else. But this is just nice and handy. It's just a 1 inch. And they do have these in metric also. This is Westcott. I'm going to add my seam allowance here. And so what I'm doing is I'm kind of finding a spot, a couple spots on the ruler, and then just kind of moving the ruler along as opposed to just kind of doing this all the way around. It's just sometimes easier for me to lock on a location. Like here I've got that 9, or sorry, the 6. And I know I do this a little bit fast because I've been doing this for a long time. If you are kind of new to this, what I would suggest is after you do that dotted line, you go in and draw them back in. Draw your lines, use the ruler, just kind of move the ruler around. And that'll just make it easier to cut. I usually just cut on my dotted lines, but you have to make sure that you're cutting straight in order to do that. And you can see right here it gets a little bit it's a little less consistent with the dots, or with the dashes. And anytime you make a new pattern, you always want to test the fit. And so I would suggest sewing one into like your fitting band, and then if it works really well, then you can make a bra with this. Just make sure you're using a similar fabric to the one you're doing your fit sample in. And if you did add some paper onto it, just go ahead and tape the back down also. This way you don't have to worry about possibly losing it, because they can easily fall apart. Yay, got done with that one. So here's my 2 pattern pieces. Now with our grain lines are always something that I battle with, and a lot of people battle with, because we are drafting around a spear. So we're drafting around, let me just grab something. We are basically drafting around a shape, something like this. So because you've got, you know, different points everywhere, your grain line could be anywhere. So what you want to do is you want to think about how your fabric is going to behave. So we know we want a little bit of stretch going along our seam line, because we don't want it to pucker. So we know we want to not have this on an absolute straight grain. And here it's going to be almost impossible. But it's really difficult to even say, okay, well, yes, the grain line's always going to go here, the grain line's going to go here, it's going to go here, here. Well, there is infinite places where your grain line can go. So this is where you just need to test it and figure out where you want it to fit. So we know we want a little bit of stretch going across. You don't need as much stretch going over here, and over here is going to be biased. So what I would actually do is I would put your greatest stretch going across, that way you're not kind of getting too tight. And I think we can restrict it from top to bottom. Now I'm just kind of drawing this. As you can see, I'm not doing a particular angle. Now on the front of the cup, we also want to make sure that we have stretch going across, so possibly the greatest stretch going across here. So then we can throw our grain line over here. And I do grain lines. What I would suggest is if you're not too familiar and you use other people's patterns as well, and you can do both. So we can put the dogs or the grain line. And some people, your fabric is going to be, the grain line is going to be the same as your dog's. So what I would do is definitely recommend, this is, let's say this is for the silver dazzle, but the grain line, you're going to use this, you know, let's say we want to do we do dogs, so here this might be the duoplex, because I was told that the duoplex stretches in the length more than in the width. So here you can actually label both your pattern for your different fabrics. So okay, which way do you want to have the greatest stretch and which way do you want to restrict it? For me, I like to consider the grain line where you restrict it, but the way fabric is made now, it's not necessarily following that same line. In my book, I do go with grain lines because I'm trained in pattern making, and pattern making we use grain lines. Dogs, or direction of greatest stretch. I'm not sure where that came from, but it was not, when I was in school, we did not use that terminology. We used grain lines, so everything was always labeled with grain lines. And so for consistency's sake, I just do grain lines, but you can certainly mark both, especially if you know that you want to have your stretch going in a certain direction. Label your patterns to the best of your knowledge. And that is my tutorial on making a 3-piece cup into a sloper into a 2-piece cup. Thanks for watching. If you would like to have more content like this, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, or leave a comment below. Thank you very much.